Well, good morning to everyone here in the US, and good afternoon to everyone participating from Lebanon. I welcome you all to this webinar, which is about one product only, thyme, a unique herb found in our region, and an herb us Lebanese are also familiar with growing up, that we feel proud to bring it here to the US food scene, or at least to bring more of it. To this end, we have undertaken a joint effort to partner with various stakeholders, such as the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, the Lebanese Ministry of Agriculture, the Lebanese Ministry of Industry, and through UNIDO with the Embassy of Italy in Lebanon. This virtual event could not have happened without the serious and committed work of our partners. Let me also extend a word thank you to Ms. Mariam Eid, Ms. Nada Barakat, and Ms. Lina Asi, and my colleague here at the Embassy of Lebanon, Kamal Yaktin, for helping out to put that webinar together, and of course to the industrialists that have joined us from Lebanon. This initiative will be followed by another business-to-business initiative connecting our producers of thyme with potential buyers in the US. We will, so what is our goal here, in short, is to bring the finest quality of thyme to the US market. We'll go about it today by having 3 presentations. The first one is with Ms. Nada Barakat. Her presentation will shed the light on the UNIDO project funded by Italy to support our agro-food industry in Lebanon. And it will also cover the results of a survey taken by Lebanese industrialists to explore the quantity of thyme we have in Lebanon that are ready to export. We are also lucky to have with us today FDA experts, Ms. Daria Kleinmeyer and Dr. Aparna Tatavarti, and Mr. Jeon Koo, to elaborate on the requirements of importing thyme into the US. And our good luck doesn't stop here. We are also grateful to have Ms. Laura Shumo on this webinar. She is the Executive Director of the American Spice Trade Association, ASTA, and she will be discussing the market structure of herbs and spices in the US with particular emphasis on thyme. Question and answers will be taken at the end of the webinar. You are also free to write them as we go along or raise your hand during the question and answers session at the end. I thank you for your participation. We will begin with Mr. Chief of Industry, and Mr. Emanuele, the head of the economic office at the Embassy of Italy in Lebanon, Mr. Luis Lahul, the very active Director General at the Ministry of Agriculture in Lebanon, and last but not least, Ms. Lina Asi, the head of Standard and Quality Inspection Department at the Ministry of Industry in Lebanon. Mr. Wael.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of my team and myself here at the Embassy of Lebanon in Washington, D.C., we welcome you in this virtual panel hosted in collaboration with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, IADC, to promote the production and export of thyme to the United States. Our goal in hosting this event is to shed more light on the Za'atar industry in the United States, in particular, the market trends and regulatory requirements. The expertise and input of our esteemed guests today will no doubt be a valuable addition to this event, and we are incredibly grateful for their participation in lending us their insights. This initiative stems from the Embassy's keen interest and efforts in promoting Lebanese goods in the United States. Given the current situation in Lebanon, this is an effort to market, growth, and share what Lebanon has to offer. We believe that Lebanese Za'atar can have a bigger footprint in the United States From a consumer perspective, it is a healthy, delicious, and versatile food ingredient with many medicinal properties, making it an attractive product across a wide consumer spectrum. And as low input crop, za'atar grows seemingly everywhere throughout much of Lebanon, where it is cultivated in large quantities and is of exceptional quality. Its cultivation also has a positive domino effect for local Lebanese communities in a couple of different ways. Firstly, the plant itself can contribute to crop diversification, a key factor for sustainable agriculture in rural areas, leading to a multi-benefit effect both on agro-ecosystems and on income generation for marginalized communities, in particular women. And secondly, given that the current issues of water scarcity in the region have limited the choices of Lebanese farmers to grow alternative crops, plants that can tolerate water scarcity are now more important than ever before to Lebanon's agricultural sector. Before ending, I would like to commend the efforts of our economic attaché, Dr. Abdallah Nasseruddin, and of our colleague Kamal Yaptin, who worked day and night during the last weeks in order to make this event possible. I'll leave the rest to the experts, but that said, we hope that you'll come away from this event with new insights, lessons, and best practices to build upon. Thank you. I think the floor is open now for UNIDO representative.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes, Nada.
Yes.
Yes, actually, I don't know if Mr.
Riccardo is with us. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Riccardo. Yes.
Thank you, Nasseruddin, for the invite, and Mr. Gadeon, Director General of the Ministry of Industry, Mr. Lahoud, Director General of the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Hachem, Chef d'Affaires of the Embassy of the Republic of Lebanon to the US, and Mr. D'Andrassi, Head of Economic Office of the Embassy of Italy in Beirut. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here to attend this important webinar on FDA regulations and market requirements for promoting za'atar export to the US. We believe at UNIDO this is an initiative that constitutes a huge potential for Lebanese za'atar producers at a time where Lebanon is experiencing a very difficult socio-economic challenges. First, allow me to thank the Ministries of Industry and Agriculture for their exceptional leadership, as well as the government of Italy for their substantial support to the sector, and the Embassy of the Republic of Lebanon to the US for standing next to the Lebanese in times of needs. Since 2011, through the CELEB project, UNIDO, in partnership with local entities, promoted enterprise development in rural areas, improving the quality of food products with special focus on the agro-industrial sector. In short, since 2011, 82 MSMEs and 25 agricultural cooperatives were directly supported, and more than 5,000 individuals have been engaged in different initiatives. It is expected at the end of this project that the number will increase to reach 6,500 individuals. These figures are even more impressive if we consider that the project intervention was able to sustain around 2,000 jobs in all Lebanon. But our journey continues, thanks to the generous contribution of Italy and the engagement of local partners. And we focus on the za'atar value chain. But why za'atar? The Za'atar has shown to be a promising sector over the last 9 years. In addition to its critical role as a driver for job creation, in particular for rural women of northern, southern, and Mount of Lebanon, the sector has witnessed an increase in export compared to the imports, despite all the socioeconomic challenges. Additionally, in 2018, the total amount of exported Za'atar mixture from Lebanon reached almost 500 tons. Lebanon exported Za'atar mixture mainly to Saudi Arabia for 26%, but to the United States for 21%, followed by Canada 16% and many other countries. So since the United States market is the second main market for the Lebanese Za'atar after Saudi Arabia, as I said, this is clear evidence that this webinar is essential and critical to learn about FDA's regulation and market requirements. Saying that, the cooperation with the Embassy of the Republic of Lebanon to the US is a key success of fundamental for future partnerships, especially on the market access part. In this regard, thank you once again, Mr. Nassereddin, for giving us the opportunity to learn about the FDA regulations and market requirements and for facilitating this webinar. Finally, we are confident that the technical presentations and inputs of all experts today on the US and Food and Drug Administration, FDA, standard for Za'atars with the spatial and seasonal mixed team, and the US market needs for the Za'atar with the American Spice Trade Association will give us a solid knowledge on standards and regulation for Lebanese Za'atar producers. And we really hope that this webinar will be an opportunity to collectively explore existing and future market opportunities for Lebanese producers in the US. Thank you once again for your attention, and I wish you a fruitful deliberation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riccardo. Thank you very much. Mr. Emanuele Dandrasi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Today's webinar confirms the great attachment of the government of Italy in support to the productive sectors of the Lebanese economy. Our cooperation with UNIDO and with the Lebanese Ministries of Agriculture and Industry is a long-standing partnership, which has achieved good results, and we hope to continue building upon our common experience. We believe agro-industry to be the sector with the most potential for development across the Lebanese economy. It is for this reason that the Embassy of Italy, in partnership with the Italian Trade Agency and the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, is currently working on a joint strategy of support to the Lebanese agro-industry and its private sector, combining the commercial partnerships with Italian companies and technologies with development cooperation projects aimed at enhancing capacities and opportunities for local companies. While increasing our humanitarian support to the population during the current socio-economic crisis, we firmly believe on the need to keep focusing on development initiatives, which can contribute to relaunching the Lebanese economy, enhance its productive sectors, create job opportunities, and improve the overall conditions of living in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emanuele. Thank you. Mr. Luis Lahoud, تفضل. Mr. Luis Lahoud, أستاذ لويس.
أنا معكم.
تفضل تفضل أستاذ لويس.
أصحاب السعادة، ضيوفنا الكرام من الولايات المتحدة.
Excuse me, بس ثانية بس. I just wanted to tell you that there is interpretation as well. You could find the interpretation below on the Zoom screen. تفضل أستاذ لويس. لا تؤاخذني ها.
المشاركين الأعزاء، أيها الحضور الكريم، يسعدني أن أرحب بالجميع باسم وزارة الزراعة اللبنانية حيث تلعب الزراعة دورا مهما نسبيا في الاقتصاد اللبناني، بالرغم من أن دورها الاجتماعي كمصدر لتعزيز قدرة الأسر المعيشية على الصمود في وجه الصدمات، لا سيما في الأزمة الحالية، كان جوهريا. ومن أجل الاستجابة لمتطلبات المرحلة الحرجة التي يعيشها العالم بشكل عام ولبنان بشكل خاص، تعتمد وزارة الزراعة الاستراتيجية الوطنية للزراعة في لبنان 2020-2025، والتي تم إطلاق العمل بها أواخر عام 2020، والتي عكست هذا التوجه برؤية بعيدة الأمد تهدف لتحويل النظم الزراعية والغذائية لتصبح أكثر شمولية وتنافسية واستدامة ومساهمة بشكل أساسي في تحقيق الأمن الغذائي ولضمان قدرة الاقتصاد اللبناني على الصمود وتحويله نحو اقتصاد منتج. وكانت الاستراتيجية الزراعية في المحور الثالث منها بعنوان كفاءة وربحية سلاسل الإنتاج الزراعي والغذائي على أولوية توفير الظروف المؤاتية لدعم الصناعات الزراعية والغذائية وتعزيز استخدام المنتجات الأساسية المنتجة محلياً، لا سيما المنتجات التقليدية ومنها منتج الزعتر. من هنا تولي وزارة الزراعة اهتماما مميزا لقطاع الزعتر في لبنان، الذي يمثل 3 أبعاد: اجتماعي واقتصادي وثقافي. فقطاع الزعتر في لبنان مرتبط بشريحة واسعة من الشعب اللبناني، وتتميز به مناطق أساسية من الأراضي اللبنانية. وقطاع الزعتر يدخل في قطاع الصناعات الغذائية التي تشكل أساساً في الاقتصاد اللبناني، كما أن الزعتر يدخل في ترويقة كل لبناني، فهو المنتج التقليدي ومن لا يعرف المنقوشة التي أصبحت من الثقافة الغذائية اللبنانية. ولكن هذا القطاع يعتبر ناشئاً جهة التنظيم وقاعدة البيانات اللذان يخولان من الولوج إلى الأسواق الداخلية والخارجية. نتوجه بالشكر للقائمين على تنظيم هذا اللقاء، ونثني على التعاون المميز بين وزارتي الزراعة والصناعة وسفارة لبنان في نيويورك ومنظمة اليونيدو من خلال تنفيذها لمشروع التعزيز على فرص العمل والإبداع في قطاع الصناعات الغذائية في لبنان من خلال نقل التكنولوجيا والتدريب على المهارات الممولة من الحكومة الإيطالية مشكورة. والشكر موصول إلى جميع المنتجين. نتمنى لهذا اللقاء تحقيق الهدف ونسر خطوات لاحقة تترجم هذا النجاح. بدي أقول لكم تحيات معالي وزير الزراعة دكتور عباس الحاج حسن، لي من خلال استلامه لوزارة الزراعة حريص على تسويق المنتوجات الريفية والصناعات الغذائية والمونة والمطبخ اللبناني. بدي حيي كل فريق عمل وزارة الزراعة ومعهم كمان اللي عم يشتغلوا بكل المناطق اللبنانية. بدي أطلب من الانتشار اللبناني والجالية اللبنانية على تسويق الزعتر اللبناني. أنا اليوم حبيت التوازي مع هاللقاء أعمل تويت لحتى أقول إنه الزعتر لبنان هو من تراث وحضارة وثقافة وتاريخ لبنان. هالزعتر اللي هو غذاء ودواء وهو منتج من النباتات الطبية، هو اليوم لازم يكون كل منتشر لبناني، كل مغترب لبناني عم يسوق هالمنتج ليحترم المواصفات والنوعية. بتسويقكم الزعتر اللبناني بكون عم تدعموا أهلكم، بتكون عم تدخل العملة الصعبة للبنان. بدي أشكر سفارتنا بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية على جهودها، خاصة السفير وفريق العمل وأستاذ وائل. بدي أشكر كمان سفارة إيطاليا، بدي أشكر اليونيدو، بدي أشكر اليو اس ايد على تعاونهم المصري، وأشكر كمان وزارة الصناعة سعادة المدير العام والمسؤولين عنه. بدي أقول نحن تعاوننا مستمر. بدي حيي كل منتجي الزعتر بلبنان، لأنه بمثابرتهم واحترامهم للمواصفات والنوعية قدروا يرفعوا اسم الزعتر اللبناني عشتم، عاشت قطاع الزراعي، عاش الزعتر اللبناني وعاش لبنان.
شكرا أستاذ لويس. Mr. Danny Jadon, actually the Director General of the Ministry of Industry, was supposed to be with us today, and actually he couldn't make it. Ms. Lina Hasi will be talking on behalf of the Ministry of Industry. She is the head of Standard and Quality Inspection Department at the Ministry of Industry. تفضلي Lina.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. I will deliver this speech on behalf of DG Mr. Danny Jadon, who presents his apologies for not being able to be there due to other pressing commitments. It's my pleasure to participate in this webinar and would like to welcome all of you. The Lebanese food industry continues to play a fundamental role in our national economy, despite all the challenges Lebanon has been facing. It's worth saying that its exports are penetrating demanding markets in terms of quality and stringent norms like the USA. Food industry is deeply rooted in our culture and economy, providing decent jobs with 25% of the industrial manpower working in this sector and is contributing to the national food security. To date, the total number of food processing establishments licensed at the ministry has reached 1,726 out of total 6,476 licensed factories. Our intervention in this workshop falls under the activities undertaken by the ministry to enhance food processing establishments and improve their competitiveness. This is in line with the ministry integrated vision, Lebanon Industry 2015-2025, to develop the Lebanese industrial sector, promote exports, and contribute to the increase of industrial productivity and competitiveness. The industrial sector being our responsibility, our ministry considers the food industry a vital, promising sector and strives to ensure that food processing establishments produce goods that meet local and international quality, food safety, and hygiene requirements in order to optimize the entry of end products to international markets. To this end, licensed food processing establishments have been supported since 2011 under projects implemented by UNIDO in partnership with the ministry by providing them with industrial equipment, training courses, and introducing innovation to Lebanese products, in addition to facilities rehabilitation. Furthermore, the ministry organized a training free of charge from the 18th to 20th of December 2017 for the Lebanese food processing establishments in order that trained people become preventive control qualified individual or PCQI. This training tackled the following issues: introduction about FISMA, what did the rule require FDA to do, what should Lebanese food exporters to the US do, and third-party accreditation. Last but not least, we will pursue our duties to support growing this sector for consumers, both domestically and globally, while maintaining the highest level of food safety and quality, which is a major pillar of our mission in coordination, collaboration, and cooperation with our national and international partners. I would like to wish the participants a very successful webinar and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lina. All right, now we'll start our presentations. We'll have the first presentation is with Ms. Nada Barakat. She is the national coordinator of the project under which this webinar is actually organized. And Nada?
Yes, I am with you.
Yes, do you want to show your slides?
Yeah, I'm gonna share my slides.
Thank you.
I hope you can all hear me clearly. Yeah, and you can see as well the presentation.
We can hear you and see you, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna start the slideshow. Okay, So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me really a great pleasure to be here today and to give a brief about the Za'atar. The Za'atar of Lebanon, cherished for its distinctive taste and aroma and the center of every Lebanese home. So allow me first to start by explaining what is Za'atar. Za'atar is an Arabic word and known in Latin as oregano. It is a herb that belongs to a larger family of plants. Oregano or oreganum species are around 43 and are mainly distributed in the Mediterranean regions. In Lebanon, Za'atar, it has really an economic and traditional importance, and it grows over its mountains and hills. And due to its widespread, nowadays it is cultivated in many regions of Lebanon, and especially in southern Lebanon. The oregano we collect and cultivate in Lebanon is specifically the Oreganum syriacum. And in Lebanon, we call the plant and the mix Za'atar. This is what we call it. And I would like to add as well that the climate condition in Lebanon ensures high essential oil quality and remarkable flavor of Oreganum syriacum. That's why we have a really remarkable taste of Za'atar from Lebanon. Now the question is, how do we use the Za'atar? Za'atar can be consumed raw in salads. Even we dry it and we use it as a topping for seasoning salads, meat, fish, vegetables, and snacks. It can be also distilled and taken orally for its distinctive health benefits. Nevertheless, nowadays, when people hear the word Za'atar, they immediately think about our famous Lebanese Za'atar mix, which is a combination of dried Za'atar, roasted sesame seeds, sumac, and salt. And Za'atar mixes are more valuable to Lebanese to the market than the plain Za'atar. Lebanese producers, over the years, they have created many blends. And all these blends are with premium and extra qualities. The taste, the texture may vary a lot, but I ensure you that the quality remains the same. Why? Because the Lebanese ministries of industries and agriculture throughout the years regulated the sector and issued several decrees, norms, and regulation to protect the collection, the cultivation, the processing, and even the distribution of Za'atar while preserving certainty in the organoleptic, chemical, physical, microbiological aspects of the mixes, and even the same applies for the plain or the dried oregano, not only the mixes. We have a Lebanese standard for Za'atar and even for the plain one, which has been developed in compliance with the Codex Alimentaris standards and requirements. And proudly we can say that our Lebanese standard is adopted as well in the region. The Za'atar mixes that we produce are found in the market in different types of packaging, as you can see in this slide. And Za'atar mix as well is part of our daily breakfast table. Some people even, when they hear Za'atar, they immediately think about the flatbread or manouche, which is a very popular Lebanese street food that is eaten on the go. I can say that Za'atar is a promising sector. And if we look at the business performance of the sector, we see that over 9 years comparative of import-export of Za'atar mixtures, the exports of Za'atar mixtures are higher than its imports. Even in 2018, the total amount of exported Za'atar mixes from Lebanon was 465 tons. Exports are mainly to Saudi Arabia, 26%, to the United States, 21%, in addition to Canada, Australia, France, UK, United Arab Emirates, and other countries. Even if we look at the dried and plain Za'atar, we see that over the past 9 years as well, it witnessed as well an increase compared to its imports. But as you can see in 2012 and 2016 were the only maybe 2 years where the imports were slightly higher than the exports, which can be linked directly to the political situation in Lebanon. And in 2018, the total amount of exported plain and dried Za'atar from Lebanon was around 223 kilograms. Lebanon exports most in value to the United Arab Emirates, 17%, followed by Saudi Arabia, 14%, Canada, 11%, Germany, 9%, Netherlands, 7%, in addition to other countries. Well, prior to the webinar and jointly with the Embassy of the Republic of Lebanon to the USA, we have developed an interesting survey, which was a questionnaire that was filled by all the participants of today. The data of this survey helped us in having a representative data, let's say, on the sector, because we don't have like a holistic data about the sector. But I can say that the number of registrations was very high. It's 53, and thank you everyone for participating with us today. Out of 53, 49% are industrialists, 17% are cooperatives, and 34% are farmers.
أحييكم مشاهدينا وننتقل مباشرة إلى أمام.
So, even when we ask them about the export, 51% confirm that they export mainly to USA, Canada, Latin America, Europe, Australia, GCC, and Africa. In terms of quantity of production, the 53 registered participants produce on average 124 tons. Even we try to divide the producers into 5 categories, in fact. 42% produce less than 1 ton per year, 23% between 1 to 5, 15% 5 to 20, 11% more than 20, and 9% they had no reply. I can say that Za'atar unites us today. A great thanks to Italy, the funder of this initiative, which is part of a bigger project called CELAP that aims at supporting small-scale producers and agricultural cooperatives to stand on their feet first and become more and more competitive on national and international markets. The project is not only like, it did not initiate only this initiative, but also is giving 6 levels of support. First, support is technology transfer. Second, skills development. Third, empowering industrial Lebanese women. Fourth, creating better working environment. Fifth, fostering creativity and innovation in the sector. And finally, facilitating market access on national and international levels. From here, allow me to launch today the Mazij. It's the small logo that you see it on the top. It is an initiative that we're going to launch soon under this project, and which combines a blend of different mixtures and products made all of Za'atar we've been working on under this project. I can say that the implementation of the project would not have been possible without the support of the Ministry of Industry, our main partner in this project, and as well as a big thank to the Ministry of Agriculture. And finally, thank you to the Embassy of the Republic of Lebanon to the USA, the Spices and Seasoning Mixes team, and the American Spice Trade Association for taking part in this webinar. Thank you so much, and looking forward to continue the webinar.
Thank you, Nada. Thank you very much. The next presentation is the FDA presentation about the regulations of thyme import to the US. We'll have Ms. Daria Klein-Meyer. Daria is actually serves as a team leader for the spice and seasoning mix. I would appreciate if everyone could mute their microphone, please. Daria Klein-Meyer serves as a team leader for the spice and seasoning mixes team and the beverage branch in the Office of Food Safety in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, where she has worked for 20 years. These elite teams of scientists address a broad range of food safety issues involving chemical and microbiological contaminants in a variety of products such as spices, nuts, and other low water activity foods, including novel plant-based products, as well as a broad range of beverage products such as juices, bottled water, alcoholic beverages. These teams provide scientific, technical, and policy expertise during outbreaks, recalls, and investigation, and they act as leads for several Food Safety Modernization Act regulatory programs. Dr. Aparna Tatavarti, microbiologist in the Office of Food Safety in the Division of Plant Products and Beverages at the FDA. She is in the Spices and Seasoning Mixes team. She has been in the OFS, in the Office of Food and Safety, since 2015. Before that, Aparna was a bench microbiologist in the Division of Microbiology in the Office of Regulatory Science. She is a subject matter expert for spices and other low moisture food. She is also an SME for the FSMA Sanitary Transportation Rule. She is the alternate US delegate for the Codex Committee for Spices and Culinary Herbs. Thank you. Daria and Dr. Aparna. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Abdallah. You can see my slides on your screen?
Yes, we can see your slides clearly.
Okay, terrific. So good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. Thank you very much for that, Abdallah. And my name is Daria Kleinmeyer. I am the team lead for the Spice and Seasoning Mixes team in the Office of Food Safety in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Our mission, in conjunction
Daria, we lost your voice. You're muted.
Okay.
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes, now it's okay.
Sorry. So our agency's mission is to protect the public health by ensuring that the food supply is safe and that the food is produced under sanitary conditions. To accomplish this mission, we work with stakeholders across industry, academia, and government, both domestically and across the globe. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss food safety, and we look forward to further engagement on the food safety topics that affect the daily lives of every person on this planet. I have a lot of material to go through today, so I'd like to apologize ahead of time, especially to the translators, for speaking rather quickly. Okay, bear with, please. I'm going to shut this down because I think our bandwidth is struggling a little bit. You can still see the slides though, correct?
Yes, we can still see
Great. Thank you. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, regulates a wide range of products, including most foods. It also regulates human and veterinary drugs, vaccines, and other biological products, medical devices intended for human use, radiation-emitting electronic products, cosmetics, dietary supplements, and tobacco products. This chart shows the regulated products imported into the US. This dark blue section here represents the percentage of the human food as a total of the FDA regulated imports. Sorry about that. So the US FDA gets its authority to regulate foods through certain laws. Foods sold in interstate commerce, including those imported into the United States, are subject to the requirements of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and the Fair Packaging and Label Act. In general, these laws require foods to be pure, wholesome, safe to eat, and produced under sanitary conditions, and to be truthfully and informatively labeled in English and in accordance with the food labeling regulations. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and subsequent amending statutes are codified into Title 21, Chapter 9 of the United States Code. During today's presentation, we'll take a very high-level view of some of the FDA's most recent codified regulations under the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. But first, I'd like to just briefly touch upon US imports. To help meet the consumer demands for food, the United States imports about 15% of its overall food supply. Today, more than 200 countries or territories and roughly 125,000 food facilities plus farms supply approximately 32% of the fresh vegetables, 55% of the fresh fruit, and 94% of the seafood that Americans consume annually. This slide illustrates how an imported entry is processed for FDA admissibility into the US. This can be a very complicated process, but my purpose in showing this to you is to highlight this one section. Imported food products are subject to FDA inspection when offered for import at US ports of entry. Products may be sampled for microbiological contamination, pesticide contamination, filth contamination, toxic elements, and so on. FDA may detain shipments of products offered for import if the shipments are found not to be in compliance with US requirements. Both imported and domestically produced foods must meet the same legal requirements in the US. So I want to forgive you, there may have been some issues with translation, but I was under this understanding that Za'atar was thyme rather than oregano. So this in the next slide may not be pertinent any longer. We will try to get you the data for oregano, but just quickly to go through this as an example, that except for 2018 here, where there was a large jump in the total value of the thyme shipments in this example. Overall, the thyme shipments to the US were relatively low, albeit there does seem to be a fairly steady increase. Again, this next slide here is about thyme, and it compares thyme with overall spice imports from the Republic of Lebanon. And as you can see, spices total is significantly greater than the thyme itself. And again, there is this continued upward trend. I'd like to shift back to the how FDA regulates foods. I previously mentioned the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA as we call it. FSMA was signed into law in January of 2011. It was the most sweeping reform of our food safety laws in more than 70 years. And its aim is to ensure the US food supply is safe by shifting the focus from responding to contamination events to preventing contamination. FDA has issued 7 rules to help achieve this goal. We won't have enough time to discuss all of these regulations, so I'll give you a quick overview of current good manufacturing practice and preventive controls for human food rule, or what we call preventive controls, or PC or PCHF. I'll go through the standards for growing produce, or the produce safety rule as we know it, and I'll also go through the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, or FSVP. Then I'll shift the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Aparna Tatavarte, who has been the co-lead, as was mentioned, on the sanitary transportation rule. She'll discuss that regulation, and as the FDA's delegate to the Codex Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs, she'll finish up by discussing some of the ongoing work on that Codex Committee. So generally, domestic and foreign food facilities that manufacture food that's imported into the US must comply with the requirements of the modernized current good manufacturing practices and for the risk-based preventive controls mandated by the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. Unless subject to an exemption or modified requirements, food manufacturers are required to have a written food safety plan. There are several components to a food safety plan. They're listed here. I won't have time to go into detail on this, but we'll provide links to more information and training that's available for many of the topics that we cover today. I was told, however, that your industry has a particular interest in processing treatments to mitigate microbiological contamination. So one detail that I did want to touch upon was the topic of validation. This here is the definition from the Preventive Controls Rule for validation. Validation of process preventive controls is a very complicated topic. However, it is perhaps the most important factor of the preventive controls rule. With respect to process controls, including any mitigation treatments, it's not enough for manufacturers to claim, we've always done it like that, which is something that we hear a lot of here. Validation establishes the scientific basis for the process preventive controls in a manufacturer's food safety plan. The other important point here is that under the preventive controls rule, the validation must be performed or overseen by a preventive controls qualified individual. We were happy to hear your interest in potential mitigation steps, and again, we look forward to continued engagement on those topics. Moving on to the next FSMA regulation, the Produce Safety Rule establishes science-based minimum standards for the safe growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of fruits and vegetables grown for human consumption. I wanted to touch upon this in the event that you have growers who are interested in shipping fresh thyme or oregano, as it were, into the US. If the product is shipped fresh, it may fall under these produce safety rule requirements as well, considered as, they may be considered as leafy greens then. Even if you're shipping only dried thyme, however, or oregano, the standards described in the produce safety rule provide good agricultural practices for any grower of fruits or vegetables, including spices. The produce rule focuses on conditions and practices identified as potential contributing factors for microbial contamination of produce. This regulation focuses on common routes of microbial contamination. These standards include agricultural water, soil amendments, and so on. There are also additional requirements for growing, harvesting, packing, and holding activities that may cut across the 5 routes of contamination. Again, we'll provide links to further information about the regulations as well as to training. The Foreign Supplier Verification Program, or FSVP, requirements apply to all foods that are imported or offered for import into the US and to the importers that are importing the foods, unless they're subject to an exemption. This rule may not apply directly to you, but may indirectly impact you because importers of food into the US may require additional information from you about your products and about the conditions and practices that you use to produce the food. The FSVP regulation establishes that importers of human and animal foods will have an explicit responsibility to verify that their foreign suppliers have adequate preventive controls in place to ensure that the food they produce is safe. Importers will be required to perform certain risk-based activities to verify that foods imported into the United States have been produced in a manner that meets applicable US safety standards. What this means is importers of food into the US are now required to scrutinize the food they import and the suppliers of that food. It will be important for manufacturers and growers of food in your country and globally to understand and comply with this, the applicable US food safety regulations, if they seek to export their products to the United States. So that was a quick whirlwind tour of some of the main FSMA regulations. I'll now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Tatabarte, to discuss FSMA's sanitary transportation rule and Codex Alimentarius. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. Thank you for your presentation. Would Daria, anyone else Dr. Aparna will be talking to or not?
Hi, good morning. I'm here.
Good morning, yeah.
Yeah, I'll continue the FSMA topic.
Okay.
Thanks, Daria, and thank you, Dr. Nasruddin, for inviting us, and thanks to the organizers of this webinar. So I'll be touching upon the sanitary transportation. So again, just like the FSVP, this rule, this FSMA rule may not directly impact the growers or the exporters in Lebanon, but it may indirectly impact. So this rule applies to food transported by motor or rail vehicles. It does not apply to transportation by air or ship. So for the international shipment, once it comes to the United States, the land-based transportation of the food is covered by the ST rule. So whoever is responsible for this leg of the transportation, like from the ocean port or the airport to the domestic destination, would be responsible for this leg. So it could be an overseas shipper, broker, or it could be a domestic importer. So they are the ones responsible for the compliance with this rule. So if you look at the rule, you will notice that exemptions and non-covered operations are scattered throughout the rule. They're not in one place. Most of them are in the definition of transportation operations that is in the rule. And some of the examples of exemptions I'm showing here are completely enclosed containers, live food animals, compressed food gases, food contact surfaces. For example, if you take dried oregano, if it's completely enclosed in a package, or if it's coming in a tin or a bottle or a jar, that is not covered by this rule. But if it's coming in a bulk shipment, that would be covered by this rule. So these are some of the key requirements. I'm not going to go over the rule, but the first one is vehicle and equipment sanitation. This includes design and maintenance of the vehicle, among other things. So it has requirements specifically for temperature controls and other things. So the next one is the transportation operations, and these must be conducted to prevent food from becoming unsafe during transportation. There are some very specific requirements in this section for shippers, carriers, loaders, and receivers. And there are some training requirements in the next section. And so FDA developed a module to help carriers, and these are carrier-specific training requirements, and FDA helped develop a module to help the carriers meet this requirement. It is not mandatory to take the FDA training. Firms can develop their own, or they can take what FDA provided and they may customize it to fit their operations better. So if you have any questions on any of the FSMA rules that Daria covered or the sanitary transportation that I covered, you can send an email to FDA's Technical Assistance Network, and we will provide links of all of these later too. So I'm switching gears a little bit here. I want to touch briefly upon what we are doing at the international level. FDA's experts are part of the US Codex program, providing their expertise as part of the US delegation. The Codex Alimentarius is a UN organization founded in 1963. It is a joint FAO-WHO food standards program. I think all the audience most likely know this. And US was one of the original members, and Lebanon joined in 1978. Codex brings food safety, consumer protection, and trade interests all together, strengthening relationships among countries. So it is a win-win situation for everybody. The mandate of Codex is to protect the health of consumers. These standards are based on science, and this also ensures a worldwide fair practices in food trade. It also fosters harmonization of food standards across the globe. So there are several committees that are cross-cutting in nature, like food hygiene, Committee for Contaminants, Food Additives, and they are not listed here. So the Committee on Spices and Culinary Herbs falls under the Commodity Committee. So countries can adapt these standards, and these are helpful to countries that may not have a lot of resources or infrastructure to do their own risk assessment. So they can benefit from these standards. I would like to emphasize that these are voluntary standards, and any regulatory agency of a particular country may or may not adopt them. So the standard for thyme, again, I think because we thought Za'atar was thyme, I apologize for that, but it was adopted and published in 2017. And speaking of Lebanese engagement, Ms. Mariam Eid is one of the vice chairs of the Codex Commission, and I believe she attended the recent session too. And so again, I'm not going to go over this whole thing, and this applies to any spice that goes at the level of to be looked at the Codex level. So for example, thyme. Dried thyme is a product prepared from leaves and flowers of thymus species, and this covers thyme irrespective of its method of production. And same applies for oregano, irrespective of the method of production, as long as it is offered for direct consumption or an ingredient in food processing or for repackaging if required. So all wild species and varieties and hybrids of this spice are covered under this standard. And again, thyme is an example here, but for oregano also, the following styles may be offered in the form of whole, crushed or rubbed, or ground into powder. So all the Codex standards have requirements for physical and chemical characteristics. For example, for in the physical characteristic table, limits are set for allowable extraneous matter, foreign matter, mold, mammalian excreta, among other things. So again, would like to emphasize that this is a minimum requirement for international trade. Some countries and firms may have higher standards than Codex standards. So the Spices Committee meets once in 18 months. It was supposed to be in India in September 2020. Of course, that did not happen, so it was pushed to April, and we met virtually in April this year. We had a great participation, maybe because it was virtual. Countries participated with larger delegations, with a lot of subject matter experts than perhaps they would in person. And we had a very successful meeting, even with very ambitious agenda. We were able to advance 4 draft standards to the final stages of adoption. And these are oregano, basil, ginger, and cloves. Saffron and nutmeg went to the next step as well, and hopefully they will be adopted in the next committee meeting. So for the next session, these are some of the new work items that have been approved. The first one is the grouping format that puts together the dried fruits and berry types of spices in one standard. So in this case, we are attempting to put together similar spices. For example, those belong to the fruits and berries category, like mustard, allspice, vanilla, into one standard to optimally use our resources and time. So this electronic working group will be chaired by the US, and it will be co-chaired by India. And the registration notice to participate and provide comments went out already. And I encourage all the Lebanese delegation and the Italian delegation to register if not already done. And the other two new work items that were approved for work are small cardamom chaired by India and Iran, and turmeric chaired by India. So that brings to the end of my talk. And here are some links. And I think somebody asked in the chat if we would be able to provide a copy of this. We will be happy to send a PDF to Dr. Nasruddin so that he can circulate. And thank you for the opportunity again to participate in this interesting webinar. And we really hope to have a continued collaboration with the Embassy of Lebanon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daria. Thank you, Dr. Aparna. And thank you, Mr. Jayon, who was also part of the team of the FDA, for the question and answers. If you want, at the end of the webinar, if you have any question, we'll be answering them at the end. We'll turn now to the last presentation of the webinar with Ms. Laura Shumo. She has been the executive director of the American Spice Trade Association, ASTA, since September 2018. In this role, she works with the ASTA Board of Directors to set the strategic direction of the association and with the ASTA staff to ensure goals are met. Prior to ASTA, Laura worked at the National Confectioners Association as the Vice President of Scientific and Regulatory Affairs. Hello, Laura.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, we can hear you very well.
I'm attempting to share my screen here. Let's see. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet, actually.
Not yet. Okay, still not. I think I'm having some difficulty with my internet connection here.
Would you like to send us your presentation quickly so we share it?
I did send it to Abdallah over the weekend.
I can send it to you right now, Nada.
Yalla, great.
Let me try one more time to.
So just a second.
Yeah, it shows that you are sharing your screen, but your screen is black. So are you sure that you opened your presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I want. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. It's an honor to participate in this event today. I wanted to start off by just sharing a little bit of information about the American Spice Trade Association and who we are, what we do. We have been around for more than 100 years, and we were formed back in the early 1900s to help the spice industry comply with new food safety and standard regulations. And our focus remains much the same today. We have about 200 member companies. About 150 or 160 of those companies are involved actively in the spice trade, in the growing, producing, blending, processing, and sale and importation of spices. At the same time, we also have member companies that support the spice industry, such as laboratories and companies that provide other types of services into the industry. It is our vision to ensure the supply of pure, safe spice and also to shape public policy to advance the spice industry. And we serve as the expert voice of the US spice industry in the global market. We have three main strategic goals. These are to advocate on behalf of the interests of the US spice industry, as well as to help foster compliance with regulations. We also work to proactively enable food safety through education and research, as well as to collaborate to allow members of the spice industry to network and collaborate. So to this end, we offer many different events, both virtually and in person, to allow for the industry to connect to one another.
Sorry, I don't, Laura, are you moving the slides or not? Because we can only see the first slide.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Now we can see the next slide, yeah.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. All right, there we go. I think. Okay. As another key objective that we have is to foster collaboration with international counterparts. So we work with trade associations overseas and governments overseas to ensure that we are all meeting the same high standards and that it is understood what the requirements are to sell into the US market. I also have put together a little bit of information on thyme. This also would, much of this type of information would apply to oregano. Of course, these numbers would need to be updated, and I'd be happy to share some additional information about oregano if that would be of interest. I won't go into detail on this because the FDA touched upon this as well as our previous speaker. But just to provide some context, the US imported a total of about 1 million kilograms of both fresh and dried thyme into the US last year. And top producers include Poland, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, France, Spain, and Morocco. So the short message here is that there are a lot of producers out there already that are making thyme and selling thyme into the United States, and there is a lot of capabilities for these countries to increase their production to meet US demand. For oregano, this list of countries would be different. Turkey is a big supplier of oregano as well. The customer base for herbs in the United States, whether these are thyme or oregano or other types of herbs, would predominantly likely for the producers based in Lebanon be the flavor and seasoning companies themselves. These would be the members of ASTA and the companies that are actually importing, blending, and selling spices to companies within the United States. Our members' key customer base in the United States is the restaurant and food service industry, as well as the packaged food industry. The actual direct sale of spices to consumers for use in their homes for cooking actually represents a pretty small portion of our market. It represents, we would estimate, less than 10% of the herb market. This will differ, of course, for fresh herbs that are being sold as fresh versus dried herbs. The market does differ a little bit. So what I'm really talking about here is the dried herb market. If you are looking to sell dried herbs, you would likely be selling them to a spice company or a broker in the United States, who then is in turn selling that to restaurants or companies that are producing packaged food products. Thyme and other herbs are often used in combination of flavors. With respect to thyme in particular, it is often used as a poultry seasoning in stuffing mixes, as well as in a wide variety of different kinds of food products, soups, sauces, salad dressings, etc. Also meats and entree products as well. Whether we're talking about thyme or oregano or other herbs, the key attributes that the spice industry in the United States is looking for are really the same. We're looking for a very pure product. The adulteration of products with other inferior types of ingredients, whether those are other types of herbs or plant matter or inferior quality of the herb itself, is not tolerated by the United States. And at the same time, we're looking for a pretty high price performance. Spices are traded on price. And so in order to be competitive, for example, in the thyme market, we would be looking to be able to purchase at about $1 a pound or less. Depending on the customer, you may see other key quality attributes that are important, such as flavor and aroma, color, depending on the application. And another issue I want to talk about is organic and the ability to have the product be certified as organic, for which there is high demand for in the US market at this time. I mentioned that the purity of product is extremely important to US manufacturers. All US spice companies will expect that the product is completely pure, meaning that it is free of stems, it's free of other types of herb products or anything else that would be considered an inferior type of ingredient, other types of plant debris, for example. We have had issues in the spice industry with the issue of economically motivated adulteration, which is the substitution with lesser quality ingredients. And so this is something that the industry has responded to by strictly monitoring and enforcing the quality and purity of ingredients that we're getting. And we do that through a variety of ways. So if you're looking to sell to producers in the United States, they're going to want to have a great deal of information about your supply chain, not only to comply with the food safety requirements that Daria and Aparna shared with you previously, but also to ensure the purity of the product. They will want to maintain strong relationships with you. They'll likely want to come and visit to see your process, to see what your relationship with your suppliers entails, and they'll want to see a great deal of documentation supporting that. Additionally, there will likely be specification requirements in the form of certificates of analysis that will include requirements to meet certain specifications around a variety of factors, including moisture, ash, volatile oil, and other types of food safety and quality measures. ASTA maintains a number of resources to help promote the purity and integrity of products that come into the US market, and these are available on our website. We maintain standards, guidance, as well as analytical methods that help the industry to verify the purity of products. And we also have a Spice Integrity Council of our membership that is constantly monitoring what's happening in the marketplace to provide early alerts to the industry about any information that may lead to an understanding that there could be economically motivated adulteration within certain types of spices coming from certain regions. Earlier, I mentioned that there's a very high demand for organic status of spices right now. In particular, we are seeing this with herbs and thyme, as we discussed previously. There are other sources of organic thyme. Morocco does produce thyme that is grown naturally, and it is just by its own nature would be considered organic. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the product, even though it may meet the organic rules, that it has gone through all of the processes to ensure that it would be certified organic. So if you're looking to supply to the US, a way to differentiate your product and to meet a demand in the marketplace at this time may be to get a certification for organic. And you can learn more about how to become USDA certified for organic on the link on the screen here. There are a variety of requirements that companies will need to comply with in order to be able to meet that certification status. I'm quickly just going to run through some of the top issues of concern for the US spice sector. really our number one issue of concern is salmonella contamination or contamination with other pathogens. And so we work to comply with all of the food safety requirements that are out there to ensure that salmonella, that products that are ultimately sold to the consumer would be free from salmonella. Other key issues of concern at the moment includes types of chemical contaminants, including heavy metals and pesticide residues. Spices tend to be grown in conditions that could very well lead to the contamination with pathogens. And for the spice sector, salmonella is our top concern. However, there are other potential pathogens that we are on the lookout for, and those include E. coli, listeria, and spore-forming bacteria. Spice companies must have systems in place to ensure that their product is free from salmonella. And so essentially what this will entail is that spices need to be treated for safety at some point in the process prior to sale to consumer. This can either happen after the spices have been imported into the United States by spice companies that are based here that will apply that treatment, that sterilization process to ensure that the product is free from salmonella, or it can occur overseas, and companies in the United States would be purchasing product from suppliers overseas that have applied that treatment method. If that happens, then the companies here in the United States need to go through significant efforts to make sure that that process is being done appropriately, as they would do in the United States. There are a variety of ways that pathogens are controlled in spices, and the top methods right now include irradiation, steam sterilization, gas sterilization with ethylene oxide or propylene oxide, and we also see some new and emerging treatment methods that are either thermally based or gas-based methods that the industry is in the process of exploring. So these processes do require pretty significant investment in equipment that needs to be validated to ensure that the process is effectively controlling salmonella in that ingredient. I will reiterate what Daria shared earlier, that it is crucial that any treatment methods that are used in the spice industry must be validated. This is required by the Food Safety Modernization Act, and this requires a significant amount of scientific evidence demonstrating the effectiveness of the methods. In particular, it will require that companies gather evidence and conduct studies on the methods to ensure that the pathogen is killed to a 5-log reduction. There are also a variety of other ways that companies ensure safety of spices throughout their supply chains. Prior to microbial treatment, it is important that the growers and suppliers of spices are following good agricultural practices. Predominantly, this will involve moisture control as well as control in the growing process to ensure that there is a lack of contamination. And if there is any kind of primary cleaning that occurs, there would be cleanliness specifications that need to be met. Regardless of whether or not the treatment is being conducted overseas or in the United States, our member companies will have some form of supply chain oversight, including audits and documentation from their suppliers to ensure that they're meeting the food safety requirements. And then, as I mentioned, there is this processing step that takes place. Aside from the treatment method, we will also likely see some form of cleaning, some form of blending, and some form of packaging of the spices. Once the treatment method has been conducted to do the kill step for salmonella, at that point moving forward in the process, it's critically important that the manufacturers follow practices that ensure that the product cannot be recontaminated following that treatment. And so that is another extremely important part of the food safety process. I mentioned that it's also very important for suppliers overseas to adhere to good agricultural practices. ASTA has published some documentation and guidance on our website about how to practice good agricultural practices for spices. This is available in a variety of languages, and it addresses practices related to the prevention of contamination with certain types of chemical contaminants, including heavy metals, pesticides, allergens, as well as mycotoxins, which ultimately arise due to the growth of mold, which comes from a lack of good moisture control. So these are available for free, and any of you are allowed to go to our website and take a look at this, and this will provide the baseline expectations for what US companies who are sourcing spices from overseas will want their suppliers to be complying with. Heavy metals at this time are probably the second biggest concern following salmonella. And when we refer to heavy metals, we're really talking predominantly about lead, but also interested in cadmium, mercury, and arsenic. US manufacturers will require that their suppliers ensure that heavy metals in spices are as low as possible. There is some unavoidable environmental contamination with these heavy metals at very low levels, but spice companies will want to see evidence that demonstrates that the levels are kept as low as possible. There is a lot happening right now on the global front, as well as in the United States and at the state level, on the specific levels that are permitted for heavy metals in spices. And Aparna mentioned the Codex process. She was really talking predominantly about the Codex Committee on Commodity Committee on Herbs and Spices. But there's also another Codex Committee on Contaminants in Foods that is working right now on the development of international limits for lead in spices. And currently for the herb ingredients, there is a draft level of 2 parts per million. In the United States, while the FDA does not have a limit for lead or other heavy metals in spices, there are limits that are established by specific US states, and many spice companies have their own specifications. So it would be very important that any herbs, whether this is thyme, oregano, or a Za'atar mix of a variety of herbs, would be falling below at least 1 part per million. And there's discussion even to lower that limit further. Thyme suppliers must ensure that they're meeting good agricultural practices to meet these levels. And you can expect that spice companies in the United States will likely require the product to be tested to demonstrate that the low levels are being consistently met. Another issue is the use of agricultural chemicals or pesticides on herbs and spices. This is a very challenging issue for the spice industry because we import products from all over the world, and there is a very wide variety of different approvals for chemicals in different countries around the world. It's not harmonized, so it is challenging to ensure that all of the spices and herbs that are imported into the United States will meet the US requirements for pesticides. The US Environmental Protection Agency maintains a list of approved pesticides for herbs and spices, and there you can find that on the link there on the slide. We also maintain a list for our members that breaks it out by specifically by each type of spice or herb ingredient to help our members better comply. And we're also working with the EPA on expanding the number of chemicals that are approved on imported spices that come into the United States. The challenge here is that the US has a completely zero tolerance for any residues at all. And FDA does screen imported spices to ensure compliance with these requirements. So this becomes challenging because, of course, as analytical method detection methods improve, it can be possible to detect lower and lower levels of residues. So care must be taken throughout the growing process to ensure that there could be no exposure to chemicals that are not approved for use on spices in the United States. The final issue I'm going to touch on is allergens. The US requires that all allergens are labeled if they're intentionally introduced into the product. And we define allergens as peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, eggs, milk, soy, fish, shellfish, and very recently, our Congress has added sesame to this list. So if any of these ingredients are intentionally used in the product, the label needs to reflect that. And manufacturers also need to take care to ensure that there is no cross-contact in the supply chain that could lead to residues of these allergens being detected in the finished product. So this means that if there are any allergens that are also being grown near to or stored near to the spice or herb ingredients, that they need to be segregated, that herbs and spices need to be cleaned. And you can also expect that your customers in the United States will likely require testing to ensure that the product is free from allergens. That summarizes my talk. We do maintain quite a few guidance documents and resources. We also offer a lot of education about the US regulatory environment and the market requirements for herbs and spices in the United States, available on our website. And I would be happy to take any follow-up questions you have. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about these issues. And with that, thank you very much. If we have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Laura, for the great presentation. We'll have like 5 to 10 minutes of question and answers. If you could just, anyone interested to ask any question, if you could just raise your hand and we'll take your question and it will be answered by our experts.
Abdullah,
yes,
sorry
Nada?
to interrupt, but can we all open our video and take a group photo before
Right now?
starting questions? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Laura,
Okay.
if you don't
Thank
mind,
you.
just
But we need to stop sharing the presentation.
Yeah, how do I'm trying to do that? Oh, here is this. Yeah, okay. I think I got it. All right.
All right. But
I will take care of it, Nada, no worries.
okay. You have no electricity, very clear.
Yeah, no electricity. All right, great. Because we have 3 pages of participants, so I'm moving swiftly into the pages. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nada. Thank you, Eve. So we'll start with the question. Maybe we'll start with the order here with Jihad Noon.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm Dr. Jihad Noon, expert on medicinal and aromatic plants and consultant with UNIDO, working on the Za'atar. I would like to clarify an issue regarding the Arabic Za'atar or Za'atar with S or Za'atar with Sad, and the equivalent Latin name, which is usually they use name.
Dr. Jihad, if you want to maybe turn off the video because it is disconnecting.
Thyme, most of these species, and I think in your presentation, Ms. Laura, you included oregano inside the name thyme, unless if you have another set of data for oregano. Why I'm saying that, just to clarify that what we are working on is oregano, but it's inside the name of thyme. It's commercialized outside, and we need to differentiate between thyme and oregano through an adapted HS code, or in the United States codes, if there is a possibility to know what is exactly the value and the the reality of the market of oregano inside the bigger market of thyme. So
yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I was confusing when I was presenting, but we had been asked to provide a presentation about thyme, but then it became clear throughout the course of the discussion that your interest was in oregano. As it relates to all of the market requirements in terms of being free from contaminants, being pure, having high quality attributes, and what our member companies will be looking for, there's no difference between oregano and thyme, really. However, I did share some market information that was specific to thyme, and we would distinguish between thyme and oregano. So those numbers that I shared, that was about the herb thyme, both the import numbers, the countries of production, that was all for thyme production. I would be happy to provide that information for oregano. It'll be larger. It will be much larger in terms of the import value for oregano. And I think that the situation in terms of what other countries are growing oregano, and what the uses are in the US market would also be different. There was just a miscommunication when we were invited to the presentation. We were requested to talk about thyme, and I think the FDA had a similar situation.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jihad. Actually, this is a good point to raise. We actually discussed that a few times with the NADA, with our FDA experts as well, thyme, oregano, and Za'atar. Second question with Mr. Nassif Rizallah.
Good afternoon and good morning for some of us. My first question is to Mr. Lahoud. The first process in export from Lebanon is the farmer certificate that we are growing the thyme and not collecting it from the wild. We are investors that have at least 60,000 square meters, and we have a farmer with us. We need a certificate for the farmer. The land doesn't have a green deed because there are no green deeds in that area. We went to have this certificate, and we went astray with the bureaucracy in Lebanon. Although we have an agreement signed by the notary, we went to the Ministry of Agriculture. They said we have to go to the under governor, Ta'am Maqam. And then he told us, no, you have to go to the Muhafiz. This is a very simple matter. In the area we are growing Za'atar thyme, there is no green deeds. It's Al-Qa'. This should be solved by the ministry. The first step to export, we are held. My second question is very brief, very precise. For the last person to present, Ms. Laura, in thyme, we combine sesame. It takes like 25% sesame in thyme. If sesame makes it more risky to export, then we can do it without sesame, and the end user will add the sesame. Because to put an ingredient that will make more and more tests will complicate our export. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nassif. I think your first question about the Ministry of Agriculture, we have some expert from the Ministry of Agriculture who actually took your question. They could deal with it. I think, Nada is here as well. Madame Mariam is here as well. For your second question, I don't know if Laura and I don't know if Daria, you want to comment on the idea of thyme and to export it without the sesame, if it makes it easier, maybe less complicated if you want in terms of requirements.
So I guess I can take that question, and then maybe Daria can help support with any additional information. But basically, you know, there are two separate situations that could be occurring. You could be selling a mix, a blend of herbs and spices, and you could be selling that direct, either in small consumer jars that are going directly to consumers, or to a company, you know, if you're selling it in bulk, that would be you selling that ingredient in turn to restaurants or to other food producers. When I was talking in my presentation, I was really focusing on the supply chain that we would anticipate, not for the sale of a blended spice ingredient, but rather for a pure single spice that would be sold to companies who then could be themselves in the United States making those blends or, you know, using those ingredients. In the event that you are producing a blend yourself that is going to be sold for sale in the United States, and that blend includes sesame, it's permitted to be sold in the United States. You just need to follow the allergen labeling requirements for sesame, which would require the labeling of sesame on the ingredient statement. And we can provide some more information about how to label the products to ensure that if you are selling with sesame, that is clearly marked on the label in compliance with our regulations. Regardless of whether, so then the other situation, if you're selling just thyme or just oregano, a pure herb to a spice company, they'll also want to make sure, they will especially want to make sure that that spice is free from any contact with allergens, because they will maybe want to use that spice in a variety of different applications, some of which could include an allergen, which would be labeled, and some of which would not. And in order for you to have access to the market, the companies will want to have that ingredient be free from allergens so that they have the flexibility to use it either in a product that could down the line contain an allergen, or that could not, because that would then, you know, not comply with our regulations. So I hope that helps clarify. Daria, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think you've covered it very well. I would just add that sesame, we do know here, we've done several surveys on sesame and sesame-based products, and sesame seeds have some microbiological contamination issues. So it is a product that we do monitor quite a bit. The other piece, you know, speaking back to allergens, or manufacturing, say, two types of products, as Laura had mentioned, you know, just a oregano or thyme or any kind of spice really, and selling that. And then on another day, you're using the same equipment to create these blends, and perhaps you're using sesame or one of the other allergens like wheat as a mixture. Something like that on the same equipment. You need to really be aware that cross-contact is of the allergens is a potential there. So the other thing I would say, once you have more than one ingredient, you know, you're talking about supply chain issues in two different coming in for two different products as well. If you're growing both sesame and oregano or thyme or something like that, there still could be cross contact in the field, etc. Of course, it's your own supply then, and you would need to be able to document that.
Well, thank you, Daria. I will actually have 4 more questions. If you could just be very brief in your questions so we could actually not stay for too long. I will go to Abdo Abla, please. Mr. Abdo.
Yes, Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Just have a general question. We are a import company here in the United States that are interested in the pure Za'atar import, not the mix. My question is, what resources does the Lebanese ministry or the Lebanese embassy provide to import company investors here in the United States? I'm not sure if Dr. Nasruddin, you want to take that question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Abdo. Actually, for that initiative specifically, we have actually two parts. The first part was more regulatory, okay, which is the current one. This is going to be followed up by another, actually, if you want, business to business kind of business matchmaking event that we will do as well with the Ministry of Agriculture, Industry, and UNIDO in Lebanon in order to kind of connect both markets. We just felt that the first step would be to make sure that the regulations here, as you've seen today in the presentation of Ms. Nada Barakat, we've shown some of the quantities we have. I presume that what you're looking for here is mainly what is the quantity produced or the quantity ready to export to the United States. So you would be able, as if you want an importer, to buy a specific quantity that you need. I think here we'll have to work with UNIDO and the ministries in Lebanon to find out how we can compile that kind of information, and that's the whole objective. You have, I think, also many companies on board today. Our industrialists are on board in that webinar. We can probably, if they could connect to me, if they have a quantity ready to export to the United States, and they will connect you to them as well. Okay, I will take the next question. Thank you, Mr. Abdo. I will take the next question with Mr. Abed Etrad. Mr. Abed?
Yes, hello, sorry for the delay.
Yeah, no problem.
I just have a simple question about the pesticide residues. And normally in South Lebanon, we don't use pesticide. We just use some to control snail. We use a basic pepper. I know it's not related to the pesticide, but what about the herbicide? Is there any obstacles to use, for example, glyphosate or other herbicide is not allowed to be used?
Thank you. Very good question. I don't know, Daria, Laura, again.
Yeah, this is Daria. I'll just touch upon that. Again, I'm not with EPA, but I can say pesticides is kind of the umbrella term for any of those chemicals that are used for pests, and that would include herbicides. Herbicides are used for weed pests, so they do fall under that pesticide umbrella.
I believe there is specifically an approval for the use of glyphosate for the residues of glyphosate, but it would need to fall within a certain MRL, a certain residue level. And if you go to the link on the slide that I shared, you can find the specific information of how low the residues need to fall for both herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides. We use the term pesticide to kind of mean all of those agricultural chemicals, as Daria said.
Okay, Mr. Karim Saikali, please. We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself, please.
Yes, hi, this is Karim Saikali from BuyLebanese.com. It's a question regarding the an FDA procedure. A few years ago, it was required from food manufacturers to register, to have an FDA registration number in the USA, which is a 10 or 11 digit number, if I remember. So I just want to know if this procedure is still in place.
I don't know, Daria, you want to take
this? Yes, this is Daria. Those requirements are in place. There are some exemptions to that. I will include a link to that to the registration requirements. I'll add a link into that final slide that will get you to the information about the requirements for registration.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Charles Saliba.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for this great intervention today on Za'atar. I'm Charles Saliba, CEO of HR Works. We're advisors for UNIDO in Lebanon, and we're working with them on the capacity building of the Za'atar producers, as well as enabling the ecosystem of Za'atar in the country to be able to, export and improve the quality of produce so that we can export larger quantities in this regards. I have just a couple of straightforward questions. Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Everybody, all the interventions were great. I'm sending this question to everybody actually who made an intervention, and the question is, that Za'atar producers in Lebanon are small to medium-sized enterprises. They're doing a lot of efforts to grow and be able to comply with international rules and regulations for export. So my question is, there should be, it seems it's inevitable that there should be a kind of an interim stage where those producers would be trained on how to not only improve, in general, the quality of their produce, but also how to comply with the requirements of certain countries. In this case, with the requirements of USA, with the FDA. So my question is, can we organize, to be more practical in this regards, can we organize training like by FDA in cooperation with UNIDO and any of the donors to help the Za'atar producers actually bring up the quality of their produce to comply with FDA regulations? That's the first question. The second one is, can we also ask for a kind of technical help in terms of the testing, the laboratory capacity of the producers here to be able to test and ensure that they are in compliance with FDA regulations, so that we save them a lot of time and effort in trying to get to the US while effectively they're not compliant. Thank you very much.
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, Daria. Yeah.
Thank you. Very, very good question. And this is a topic actually to your first point or question. This is a topic that I did want to discuss with Abdallah again, to see about what the engagement could involve in thinking about the work that is already taking place over there. I know Abdallah had mentioned cooperatives, etc. It occurred to me that we have done some collaborative trainings with other countries. So we could model similarly some training or train the trainer, for example, which would help spread the training out throughout various regions, etc. So I do think there is some potential there. I'll have to reach out on our side and see where the resources are currently. But I do think there is some potential there for training. With respect to lab capacity, there may be some room for further discussions there as well. I know we have, as part of FISMA, actually, there's some lab capacity enhancements there. So I will look into that and try to get back to you with some additional information.
Thank you, Daria. Charles, thank you actually for mentioning that. It would be great actually to try to follow up with some, if you want, more technical webinars, or if you want training about that. I will reach out personally here with Daria and Dr. Aparna and even Laura to see in what capacity and what framework we could do that with Lebanon. There is I will take just two more questions. One is actually about I don't know, maybe it's Daria here again or Aparna, with the respect to the decontamination system, does it have to pass through an FDA approval procedure, or as long as the technique is a validated one, then there is no need for that?
Well, FDA does not specifically sign off on validation of process controls. It's real, the burden of proof is on the industry to do that. Having said that, we know it is, as I mentioned, a very complicated process, and we do have engineers, process engineers that review some. We obviously cannot review every process control on the face of the earth, but it is perhaps a follow-up webinar that we might consider putting together. I would just say, if you have not already purchased your equipment, you may want to press the manufacturer of the equipment to provide you with the information prior to making that investment, and see just how much validation information they can provide to you. But certainly it is a very complicated area, but also one of the most important.
Yes, Dr. Nada, I don't know if Dr. Nada Durra, I think, answered that question. I don't know. I hope your question was answered. Thank you, Daria. We'll take one more question with Hassan Alamuddin, please. If you could unmute yourself, please. Hassan, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Marhaba, marhaba, hi. My name is Hassan Alamuddin. I'm representing what the time Women Association Cooperative from Rashaya al-Wati. And their main is in Rashaya, and the branch in Baysur Ainab. My question is, which is the most important, I shared before with the Zoom meeting before, and now I am sharing. What's important to me is to find a way to start the first step to export my product, our product. This is the product. It's very famous in Lebanon. We have been marketing this brand for 8 to 9 years. But till now, we couldn't export this. It's well known in Kuwait, because Kuwaitis come to Lebanon and Saudi Arabia. But till now, we did not exceed to export this product outside Lebanon. In Lebanon, I'm happy of the result for the 10 or 8 or 9 years.
Hassan, I don't want to cut you off, but if you could, I think your point here is actually you have some success story of your product in Lebanon and the Gulf region, and you're trying to extend that to the United States. And
exactly.
I think that's the whole objective, the whole initiative. What we're trying to do here, the UNIDO, I'm going to say it again here, we're trying to kind of follow a kind of clustering approach, joint efforts of all industrialists through that initiative in order to have a larger quantity, a bigger impact in the US market, instead of having small quantities with different industrialists. I think you could reach out to me, you could reach out to Nada and to the Ministry of Agriculture and Industry, mainly the focal points in that initiative, and there will be follow-up on that. I'm sure in a couple of months you will hear back from us. Okay, I was supposed to stop here, but thank you, Hassan.
Is Miss Lina Asif from the ministry?
Yes, Lina, please.
Yeah.
Miss Lina Asif from the Ministry of Industry. Yeah, Lina, we can hear you. Lina? Lina, we can't hear you, huh?
Yeah, we can't hear her.
Now?
Yeah, it's better.
Now we can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to mention that we have in Lebanon an updated standard about pesticides residues. So people who are asking about pesticides residues can consult the standard and buy it from Lebanon. So it may be, it is surely helpful for them. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lina. Thank you for clarifying that. I think I will, for the question and answers, thank you everyone for the questions. Thank you for the answers as well. I'm sure it was very beneficial to everyone. Before giving it over, passing it over to Nada, I also want to thank our Ambassador Kavlakian, Vaskan Kavlakian, the director of the Economic Directorate at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lebanon, for joining and staying till the very end. Thank you, dear Ambassador. Thank you very much. Okay, Nada, I pass it over to you.
Okay, it's already 7. Thank you very much for all your participation. Really, it was a great and fruitful workshop. From our part, as UNIDO, we will reach out again to all the participants, and we might as well prepare one workshop about maybe standards, even the name of Za'atar. We need to clarify it more and more about, we're gonna base our nomination on the Lebanon standard. And for sure, Abdallah, thank you so much. You will be our focal point. We will get back to you to liaise with FDA as well to check if we can do series of trainings for the Lebanese producers. And for sure, we're gonna as well prepare for B2B meetings. So we have now some relative data, and sure we're gonna scale it up to reach more and more industrialists. And we hope we can do something for the Za'atar value chain in Lebanon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nada. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining that webinar. Okay, and hope to meet again with future fruitful webinars as well. I will leave it here. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.